in our study of Isaiah. I promise we will get back to Isaiah next week. I did this section before I did any of my chapter 13, 14 notes. I did this section before I did my 19 notes, anything like that. The two things that I really want to stress, not so much the specific details of the book, but why we're studying Malachi, the two main points. The first one is, he uses the metaphor, and I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and terrible day of the Lord. It's straight metaphor. It's very easy to understand that it's the metaphor because Christ quotes it and says, if you will, John the Baptist is this Elijah that was to come. John the Baptist is fulfilling this verse. Christ is literally saying that himself. And I'm kind of giving away the ending at the beginning. So I want you to see, yet again, we have a prophet using a metaphor. Not just a metaphor, but a type, anti-type metaphor. And that's what I think we just got finished with mystical Babylon. Well, when we get to chapter 19, we get to Egypt. And I'm going to try to illustrate kind of the same thing there. So, God's use of metaphor through these Old Testament prophets is very strong, it's very rampant, it's all over the place. And once you pick out a couple of the easy ones and you associate it with type, anti-type, it makes it easier to see some of the other ones, like a Babylon. Babylon is easier to see than the Egypt one, but when you really comb through the Egypt one, be like, okay, I see it. Once you start getting into the minutia there. The second reason on why this is important, it probably won't mean anything to you now, but at some point, if you ever really dig into this, you may not. It's not the most important part of the Bible or anything. It is post-Egyptian captivity. It is post-Assyrian troubles, captivity, wars, whatever. It is post-Babylonian captivity. This is, all of the types are already done. So he's just straight talking to the Jews, and you'll see that. Here, it's Malachi is. And it's very direct, and it's saying the same stuff. Okay, I was joking with my mother-in-law on the way over here. I'm like, we're going into Malachi tonight. How much do you know about Malachi? And I asked Lauren earlier this morning, I was like, how much do you know about Malachi? None. I'm like, it's okay. It's the exact same stuff I've been saying every single week, right? Except this is one of the easier ones.
Where is he time-wise with all the prophets? Is he a contemporary of some? Where is he in?
Is there. He's at the very end. He's at the very end of the Old Testament.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
I didn't know time-wise if that was
He's so late. He is so late in the timeline of the Old Testament that he's only 100 years before Alexander the Great. Okay, that says a lot to me because all of this, King David is 1000 BC or something like that. Isaiah is in the 700s BC. Man, that is a long time ago. And history wasn't, well, these two guys could tell you, history wasn't as great at being documented in 1000 BC as it was in 322 BC, 332 BC. It gets, the closer you get to today, the better the documentation gets. He's close to, we got records everywhere of everything. So it's fascinating to me on how late Malachi is in this game, but yet he says the same stuff. He says the same stuff. There's debate on, is Malachi even his name? I don't want to get into any of that stuff. I'm not trying to worry about any of that. No, I'm not. No. It's like, is it messenger? Is it the guy's name? Is it mean angel? Is it, what is it? I'm not going there. Y'all can mess with that. I'm just going to look at his message. But he kind of ends, he's dealing with, we got time out. Come on there, guys.
Thank you. We were eating a lot.
I get you, girl.
We were the last in line to eat.
I heard the line was terrible.
We swallowed it whole to get here.
We heard the line was real bad.
We were they weren't prepared. They just weren't prepared for that many hamburger eaters.
So he is a little background on what he's talking about here. He's contemporary with Nehemiah, into the books of history there. And what's going on? He's in the time. What's their big problem when they've come out of this Babylonian captivity? They've rebuilt the temple. They've rebuilt Jerusalem. What trouble do they get into? What's the big lesson, the easy lesson in the Old Testament there, in Ezra and Nehemiah? What was the big sin that they were doing? Y'all know?
Was it worshiping idols?
You're on the right track. You're on the right track.
What they usually do.
No, that's the answer for all time periods, right?
Or marrying.
Yes, there you go. There you go. That's the answer.
Always one of the two.
That's the answer. They were marrying all these foreign wives that they were prohibited from marrying, and those women, I mean, they're trouble, right?
We still are.
Don't act innocent. She's like,
Still today.
don't act innocent. My wife is back there.
Always investigate.
So they were causing trouble because they would marry him, and then they're like, oh wait, well let's worship my God too. Okay.
Oh boy.
Dumb old dudes.
Mm-hmm.
And they were falling for it. So that was the problem. So he says, get out of these marriages, stop living in sin, stop continuing to do what I told you. I don't care about your kids' sports. I don't care what people in the congregation are going to think of you. Get out of this. That's what he's saying.
Except for wrestling.
What?
I said Jews aren't athletes except for the quarterback for BYU.
So that's what's going on with Malachi. Now let's take a look at what's he doing here. And we're going to go through these 4 chapters pretty quick. Chapter 4 is only a couple of verses. Who is the target? It's easy. The answer is easy. It's the Jews. Judah and Jerusalem. Isaiah was a book about Judah and Jerusalem. Here he's talking about the Jews, but almost a little more specifically, the priests, if you look in verse 6. He's saying, hey, you pollute this offering. You're taking by force from the lame, the sick, the blind, and you're using that to be your offerings. You're sacrificing their stuff, not your stuff. I'm not happy about this. I'm not going to accept this worship. Talking to the Jews, keep this in mind. And he says, this is your first little key here of, my name is going to become great. Let's read verse 11 here. For from the rising of the sun, even into the going down of the same, my name shall be great among the Gentiles. And in every place incense is offered unto my name, and a pure offering. For my name shall be great among the heathen, saith the Lord of hosts. So that's kind of a big deal, right? He's saying, you're bad, I'm going to destroy you, it's going to be this great terrible day of the Lord, and when that happens, my name's going to start spreading throughout the Gentile world, and they're all going to be worshiping me properly. This should be ringing alarm bells. That can only happen in Christianity. That's when that happens. That's when that is fulfilled. He goes to the heathen, to the Gentiles. I'm going to be a light unto the... Christ is going to come, and he's going to be the light unto the Gentile. It is a big-time recurring theme in the book of Isaiah. So this is your first clue on when do we think this is going to get fulfilled? When do we think this... Because Malachi is like a lot of warning, but there's a couple of little prophecy tidbits in there. You're doing this. Stop doing this. You say you're not, but you are. We tell you to do this, but you say, oh, what about this? They're kind of scoffing. They're kind of belligerent about it. But there's a couple of lines in there, like verse 11, and I'm telling you, that is a messianic prophecy right there. I'm telling you that is fulfilled in the 1st century AD, just like all the stuff in Isaiah. But not the Jews. They're not going to be offering these pure offerings. The Gentiles would be, but Judaism, the Jews there, and think 1st century, they would not be. So the heathen world, the Gentile world, under Christianity, would be worshiping properly, while the Jews there in the 1st century would not be. And again, this can't be pointing backwards to Babylonian captivity. That happened 100 years earlier. More. And the Jews would be cursed. And there's a lot of that. You can cross-reference that all over the place. That starts in Deuteronomy. He's going to curse them. Chapter 2. We're flying through the book of Malachi. So he continues this curse of the Jewish priests. Who's the target here? The Jews. And I keep saying this because I don't want you to think that Malachi is talking to all of us today, that we are the target today, that this is some end of the world, end of time prophecy. Nothing in here is about that. It is about the Jews, the transition from Judaism to Christianity. Y'all are going to get tired of me saying that. That's the theme of the class, and it's a long class. He's going to rebuke the Jewish seed. We've talked about this multiple times in various ways. The women were going to face this shame and reproach. They're not going to have their continued inheritance of the kingdom. And then later on in Isaiah, the Gentiles were going to be adopted in to become the heirs. They were going to receive the kingdom. They were going to receive the Christian church. Verse 5 through 7, he's quoting Numbers. He's going through the priestly contract with them. He says, you did not keep to the contract. I set up this special deal with just the priests, the Levites, the priest, and you did it. You were dealing treacherously. And remember the background of Malachi. What Malachi is what they're going through when Malachi is written. They're dealing treacherously. And you will find phrases all over the Bible. The treacherous dealers dealing treacherously. The tormentors tormenting, or it would flip on them and get tormented. The persecutors persecuted. Because everything was going to get turned back on them, what they were guilty of. Chapter 3. Man, I'm flying through this. Faster than I thought. But it's easy, right?
Yeah.
Right, this is not a hard book. And its time period, being 100 years after that Babylonian captivity, makes it very clear, very easy. It cannot be some earlier judgment on the Jews, because they got several. But there's only one left. And that's at the hand of the Romans later on. Malachi 3:1. Behold, I am sending my messenger, and he will clear a way before me. Believe it or not, there are people that says this is not John the Baptist. They think this is some other person. They think this is Malachi referring to himself. If his name is even Malachi, I know it's kind of hard to follow. But man, if that's the lesson you heard, if that's what I was teaching from, and you'd be like, okay. But it's just weird, and it's super easy to understand because somebody read Matthew 11:10.
Prophets never self-insert though, ever.
It's weird sounding.
So, so people saying that haven't read prophecy apparently, like ever, because prophets never self-insert. Ever.
When I read that theory, I'm like,
That makes no
I had
sense.
to read it twice, and I'm like,
Yeah, that makes no sense.
that's a no for me, dog.
Yeah, no. Yeah, 100%.
But it's super easy. It's super easy.
Yeah.
But most people get it right because all they do is go, who's got Matthew 11, Carol?
Is it 11:10?
11:10, I think.
This is the one about whom it is written, I will send my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way before you come.
Okay. He's quoting Malachi 3:1. Christ is saying that's John the Baptist. There's no guessing on this. There should be no theories on this. And when does John the Baptist come? Does he come in the first Babylonian captivity? Does he come, I'm being very facetious here, right? Does he come when they go into the, what's all that Hanukkah stuff? The Maccabean revolt? Is that when John the Baptist comes? No. It's a first century event. Malachi, just like Isaiah, is primarily focusing on the first century. And guess what? They all were. They all were. You go read Zechariah. And when you really dig into it, you're like, he's talking about the Church of Christ. I'm gonna do this with the temple, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, and in that day, Christ is going to come into town riding on a donkey. What? I thought we were rebuilding the temple. I thought this was gonna be, oh wait, this is a anti-type thing. I taught this, one of the very first times I ever taught it in this congregation was, not one of the very first times, the very first time. I filled in for Bob downstairs in the gym area. And he's like, I need you to teach Zechariah. And I go, in one day? Everybody laugh now. I'm not covering that big a book in one day, right? And he goes, well, you can take 2 days. I was like, I'll try.
How about a month?
And I got done, and there were people asking me like, wait, I thought this was talking about the end of the world. I'm like, well, is Christ going to come riding into town on a donkey at the end of the world? Or is that fulfilled in the first century? Come on, we know the answer to that. And there's that, and in that day, it's really prevalent in Zechariah. Other books are the same way. So, Malachi says, I'm sending my messenger and he will clear the way. Christ quotes it. You get it again in Isaiah. This is how we begin next September. When we start class back up, we're going to start in the second half. I don't care where I finish in the first half. We're going to start in the second half. Because after we get through 19, we're going to speed up. Because it gets easier. Okay? 13, 14, 19 that's the climax of the first half. I'm going to be able to go a little faster, I think, through the next 100 slides or so. This is slide 175 of the first half. Each one has like 400 slides. It takes me a lot of time to prepare. Isaiah 43, quoted in Matthew 3:3, this is John the Baptist. This is John the Baptist. And again, don't let your mind get tricked into thinking their sole objective is the type, is the forerunner. It's easy in Malachi because those are all done. So you're just, Malachi is super easy. That's what I said at the beginning. The timing of Malachi is very convenient for us because all the types are done. There's only the anti-type left. There's only the final main point left. That's the only thing left in history when Malachi is written. And he's talking about this transition. Think about what we've been saying so far. Hey, Jews, specifically the priests, you've been bad. You've been stealing from the lame, sick, blind, and act like that's an offering. I'm not going to accept it. This great and terrible day of the Lord is coming where you're going to burn as the chaff in the fire. And in that day, the Gentile heathen world is going to start worshiping me the correct way. And when you say it like that, you're like, huh. He's talking about the transition from Judaism to Christianity. It can't be anything else. It cannot be at any other time. Verse 2 and 3. Who amongst the Jewish priests would be able to stand the purging and purifying done? You know what? I'm going to read those because you'll see this language at other times, and a lot of people will read various reiterations of these two verses, and they'll think it's talking about the end of time. It's talking about going to heaven and hell. It's not. This is what it's talking about. Malachi, what am I in? 3? But who may abide the day of his coming? The day of his coming. Not the end of time, when he's coming to deliver this judgment upon Judah and Jerusalem. The Jewish priests. The Jews are the target here. Okay, this is not some future for us here in this room. It's not future for us coming. It was future for them. And who shall stand when he appeareth? For he is like a refiner's fire, like a fuller's soap. Isaiah cross-reference, Zechariah cross-reference, Matthew cross-reference, 1 Corinthians cross-reference, maybe more. Those verses are all talking about the same thing. This. And he shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. And he shall purify the sons of Levi. Who? Not the whole world. This is not a judgment on the whole world. This is not the end of time. This is not us going to heaven and hell. This is a judgment against Judah and Jerusalem. Specifically, Malachi is focusing on the priests. That they may offer unto the Lord an offering in righteousness. He's going to purify them. The good ones are going to make it. They're going to go through this refinement and come out nice and pure. The bad ones are going to be done away with, destroyed. And then you have the remnant, the ones that are spared. He uses a little bit different language here. But you need to know it's the same thing as the remnant, and we already know that the remnant is talking about the Jews that converted over to Christianity. The remnant that converted to Christianity would be pure again. The Gentiles would then be added to them. That part's not in it. I don't think that part's in here. Verse 5. Judgment would come upon the Levites and the Jews in the whole, in that first century AD. This is not an end of time prophecy. This is not an end of time book. This is not some science fiction film where people are disappearing out of airplanes and helicopters and those are crashing into buildings. No. This is a first century event. Behold, I'm going to send you John the Baptist, and then that dreadful day of the Lord is going to happen. He's going to prepare the way for Christ. The way is going to come. Those that convert, those that are saved, those that escape out of this persecution that you're going to be going through then, they're going to be good. They're going to be in good shape. It is a first century event. Verse 9, the Jewish nation is cursed. Again, my focus here is not the whole world. It's not an end of the world prophecy. Verse 10 through 12, repent and I will save you from that consuming locust army. I don't think it uses those exact words, but you get to compare, and Cody and Kevin brought it up to me one time. That locust army you will find in the book of Joel. You'll find it in a couple of different spots. I think we've already covered it a little bit in Isaiah or wherever we were covering it. That's very descriptive and typical of the Roman army. Whereas Cyrus did not do all of this all-consuming, destroy the land, burn, slash and burn type stuff. It's a very unique to the Roman type thing, to the Roman army type thing. Verse 17, skip down a little bit. And they shall be mine, said the Lord of hosts, in that day. In that day, when I make up my jewels, when I take my royal crown, my royal diadem, what is this? What is the original jewels in the Bible? What is he talking about here? I don't have it on the slides. I'm gonna let y'all guess. I'll give you a hint on where it is. It's in Exodus 28, 25, 28, something like that. And it's in Revelation 21. And what does it represent? I'm more interested in what it represents. Any guesses? Kind of in the middle there in Revelation 21. The Exodus verse is much better because the Revelation verse is cryptic.
In Revelation, is it the New Jerusalem?
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Okay.
But
The original jewels, wouldn't they be the 12 tribes?
they are the 12 tribes. The people of the kingdom. That's what, so that, all of those, hey, the 12 jewels of the city there in Revelation, it's just Aaron's breastplate. That's all it is, representation of the people of Christ's kingdom. That's all it's talking about.
Revelation.
Weird theories will tell you,
21.
yeah, heaven is going to be this, and there's going to be this, and it's going to be this, and I'm like, you missed the symbolism completely. You missed the metaphor. You missed this. Go read Exodus, and then let's talk again. But that's what he's saying. In that day, and again, I still have yet to find an in that day that is not talking about the first century. Because I keep highlighting it. Every time I highlight it in green in here. Malachi 3:17, and in that day, when I make up my jewels, I will spare them as a man spareth his own son that serveth him. So after John the Baptist come and I'm doing this refining and destruction of the Jews where I'm purifying, the ones that stand up to the test are going to come out and be saved, the remnant here, I'm going to gather my jewels. This is a first century event. This is a first century event. And I think that not everybody was in here at class 1. But if you remember in class 1, I think we got through one verse. This was the verse. I think it's saying the same thing. I think this verse is the point of the book of Isaiah. And I think this verse is similar to it. And the Gentiles shall see thy righteousness, and all thy kings thy glory. And thou shalt be called by a new name. Dead giveaway right there. Which the mouth of the Lord shall name. Thou shalt also be a crown of glory. The jewels, all the precious stones, all of this. This is a very good thing. You are going to be, you people, you Christians, you followers of God, you're going to be this crown of glory in the hand of the Lord and a royal diadem in the hand of God. That's what this is. It's talking about us. We are the precious thing to God the Father. I don't know how much he really cares about rocks. I'm not going to say he doesn't care. He made them, right? But we are so much more valuable than a rock, a precious gemstone. My wife would probably trade me for one, but the rest of y'all are important. Malachi 4. For behold, the day is coming. In that day, stay on topic, stay in your context here. John the Baptist is going to come. When these Jews were going to get refined and the Gentiles were going to be a part of the church. For behold, the day is coming, burning like a furnace, and all the arrogant and every evildoer will be chaff. and that the day that is coming will set them ablaze, saith the Lord of armies, so that it will leave them neither root nor branches. And you see this chaff or this burned away as stubble. It's like over 24 times throughout the Old Testament prophets. A lot of minor prophets will cover. It was in Zephaniah. I don't know if y'all caught that or not last week. It's in Matthew. It's in Mark. I don't know if it's in Revelation or not. But it's just all over the place, and every single time it's talking about this ultimate judgment upon the Jews when the kingdom is being taken away from them and given to the Christians. Malachi is the same way. But Malachi is easier to understand because you have John the Baptist is in-your-face metaphor that Christ explains for us, and it's after all the other captivities. It's easy. It's an easy book. When the antitype Elijah is sent, followed by Christ, the Son of Righteousness, one of my favorite verses. I'm going to go ahead and read it. This is one of my favorite verses in the Bible. Because when I first start talking to people, the very first thing I have to try to teach is what? What have we gone over 100 times and y'all are tired of it? The sun, moon, and stars. Right? I've got to get you to stop seeing that as literal. Because if I can't convince you of that, I can't get anywhere. This is one of the primary verses I go to explain that. Joseph's dream in Genesis 37 is fantastically awesome. This is good too. And then you start reading the end of Revelation 21, you're like, oh, Christ is the Son. He's replacing that Jewish king. That sun is going down so that we can see the way. He's our leader. It all comes into place. It all makes perfect sense. But this verse is fantastic. One of my favorite in the Bible. But unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings. And he shall go forth and grow up as calves of the stall. That's Christ. The Son, the S-U-N of righteousness. We're kind of drawing everything we've been learning in this class back into this one verse. This is about Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, our Messiah, the S-O-N of God. That's what the Bible was concerned about. All of it. Not a random verse here or there. It was all centered around Jesus Christ. That's what I teach. I don't teach weird stuff. You go downstairs, you go like, how was class? Oh, of course, teaching this really, really weird stuff. No, I don't teach a single thing you don't already know. I just connect stuff you didn't know was connected. I told Tom this a long time ago. I'm like, okay, I'll take you through this. He's like, man, it's real complicated. I'm like, no, you're going to know every single thing I say. I just connect the dots. And in that day, when Elijah has come, meaning John the Baptist, to prepare the way for the Son of Righteousness. So when John has come and Christ have come, hey, you wicked Jews that would be burned away as chaff, you're going to be trodden down. Do we see the phrase trodden down or trod down ever in the New Testament? Oh, we see it in Revelation. And the holy city was going to be tread underfoot. We've already gone over this verse. The holy city, never referred to as Rome. Rome is the eternal city. And the winepress was trodden without the city. Blood came out of the winepress. 11:8 says, and this is the point, I think I'm getting ahead of myself, but 11:8 says, and that city, which is spiritually called Sodom, Jerusalem is called Sodom all over the place. Almost every book in the Bible. That city which is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt. That's what we're doing next. Isaiah chapter 19 is the iteration of where Jerusalem is spiritually called Egypt. There's another part a little bit later in Isaiah that's a little bit easier to pick up. But this is where God is saying, you're just as bad as Egypt. You're just as bad as Egypt. You're just as bad as Babylon. You're just as bad as Philistia. You're just as bad as Moab, Edom, Assyria. You're doing all of these things. I destroyed them, the types. I'm going to destroy you, the antitype. You're no better. The only reason you're getting away with it is because Christ is not here yet. I've got to have prophecies fulfilled. You get time to repent. Please repent. He does that. And what's the last verse of, second to last verse of the entire Old Testament say?
Elijah.
Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Not the end of time. This judgment against the Levites. It's one book. Ignore chapter breaks. There's one topic here. He's not Levites, I'm going to bring purge. Bam, all of a sudden we're talking about the end of time. Nope, that's not what he's doing. He's going to refine the Jews, and the ones that would be spared from that, the ones that would convert to Christianity, would then be joined with the Jews, and they would all worship with this pure worship. This whole thing about the Gentiles is very mysterious. It's very misunderstood. It's a hard concept for the Jews to understand. Even the apostles in the first century were struggling with it. It was a weird thing for the Gentiles to be a part of God's people. It just blew their mind. And so when he talks about it, you can see he talks about it here in Malachi. He talks about it in Isaiah. These almost poetic ways there, and they're going to offer this pure offering. I'm going to be a light into the Gentiles, and you're going to be a royal diadem that's going to shine, and the Gentiles are going to come into it. And you're like, okay, I kind of hear what you're saying, but I don't really understand it, because we're God's people. That's what the Jews were doing. Like, you're saying words, God, but I don't know what you're talking about, because the Gentiles are heathens and we're Jews. That's the attitude they had. It's very hard for them to understand this. But once you start seeing all of this Gentiles coming in, you know this is a first century event. It's first century prophecy. And I already gave all the answers away at the beginning. But he's talking about John the Baptist. This is kind of the explanation, the definition of type, antitype here. I'm going to send you Elijah the prophet. Zechariah, he's pretty much just quoting this verse, the angel there in Luke. And it is he who will go as a forerunner before him in the spirit and power of Elijah. In the spirit and power. Just like Elijah had this spirit and power, John the Baptist is going to do the same thing. Type, antitype. The same person. I think I need to wait for my Ezekiel. Is it the next one? Nope. Nope. Okay, I want to go through it now. Ezekiel 37. It's a great chapter. Ezekiel is written when? Do y'all know? Around this Babylonian captivity time period, right? I'm pretty sure, somewhere in there. Either early 6th century, I think early 6th century is when he's, 6th century BC. I think that's when he's talking. He gives this, hey, I'm going to reunite the north and the south. I'm going to put these two sticks together, and David is going to be king again. But he doesn't explain it. He doesn't explain it. He just says the metaphor. He says the antitype. He just says the type. But everybody that's ever read that passage is like, David is Christ. Christ is the antitype. He is the king of God's chosen people. So in the spirit and power of David, there's Christ. Type, Antitype. This is what he's doing here. It's metaphor. If your mind goes literal on most of this stuff, you're going to mess it up. Think metaphor, think type, antitype. It's explained in a few places. It's pretty easy to figure out in a few other places. Babylon in chapter 13 and 14 of Isaiah, that's a little harder. You got to do your work on that one. 19, I think the Egypt one is a little bit easier because he's sitting there calling them Egypt, my people. I'm going to send you a Messiah. All this stuff. I'm giving stuff away here, but that's what's going on. Christ himself, so getting back to this, and it is he who will go with us as a forerunner before him in the spirit and power of Elijah to turn the hearts of the fathers back to their children and the disobedient to the attitude of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. Christ is saying, if you can figure it out, if you can sit down and think for a second, that back in Malachi, he's using a metaphor, and if you want to really think about it, like, oh, John the Baptist, John himself is Elijah who was to come. This one's easy because Christ is sitting there spilling the beans on it. He's giving it away. But the people that first read this were looking for literal Elijah to be resurrected. And guess what? When you start getting out there and studying theories out there, there are people that are looking for literal Elijah to come before the end of time. When Elijah comes back, you know the end of time is about to happen. You've heard those theories? Have you ever heard them?
The two messengers.
Two messengers, Elijah being one of them.
Elijah and Enoch, right?
Maybe. It just depends upon what theory you're talking about.
In Revelation, the two messengers that are killed for
chapter 11.
For the world to see.
It's back in chapter 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I look at, what we've been studying and all these different prophets and all of this. But look how many hundred years it was before Christ really came, or John the Baptist really came. We're talking generations.
Centuries.
So
You counted in centuries. That's how long it was.
Why was this so important? Why would it be important to the people living?
Because he wanted them to straighten up. So the message that they were hearing was applicable. The message that those Jews were going through right then, they needed to hear that message. They needed to straighten up. They needed to stop doing this idol worship and this sacrificing of the lame, sick, and deaf, or whatever I said. So he needed to give these warnings to them to keep this holy nation at least somewhat pure to get them to Christ. So he had to keep prodding them. Stay with me. Stay with me. I'm going to destroy you. Stay with me. And so a portion of them do, and that enables Christ to be brought into the world. I think that's why that's happening. And then, there's a big inflection point in the Maccabean time period. You've got, they really come back strong, and they run out the Hellenizing Syrians. At that time, it would have been the Seleucid dynasty, the Greeks. They run them out because those people were trying to Hellenize them so much. They were trying to get rid of Judaism and really make them all. And it's probably good for nation building and stuff like that, but it's not going to work against God's people. So probably proper national interest. It's kind of how so many successful nations have done their thing, but you get to that point, that Maccabean time period, is that 140s or 160s? 160s. And you get that Maccabean revolt, you get Hanukkah, that's where that comes from, right? And then it's this slow, they're good, and Daniel describes this in his, and then there's this kind of slow movement towards Christ after that. There's not a whole lot that happens until I think it was Pompey comes in and starts interacting with the Jews. And that's when they start really, some priests get into a big argument on who's the successor line, and they appeal to Pompey. And he's like, yeah, I would love to help you. By the way, I'm in control of you now, and give me all your money.
Unknown caller.
Unknown caller. Tell them we're almost done.
Oh, my God. I'm a chill in the face.
So why are we doing this? Why did we just do Malachi in the class on Isaiah? This is a lead up to chapter 19. Second biggest portion of the first half of Isaiah to me. The second most fun part. That 13, 14 is a lot of fun to me. You get into the 60 through 66 is probably my favorite part. But it would be a long time before we're there. It's to point out the metaphors. Isaiah and Malachi are talking about the same subject, the first century stuff, events. I need you to use your cross-references to study this stuff. The cross-references are more important than the actual verse you're reading, because it ties it all in, and you're like, well, I know that passage is talking about Christ. I know that passage is talking about when the Gentiles, I know that Ephesians 2 is talking about when the Gentiles would be part of the church of Christ. I know that. You start tying them all together, because they are all tied together. Use those cross-references. So if I just read Malachi 3:1 or Malachi 4:5 and I don't use the cross-references, who is this messenger who is this guy that was going to prepare the way? I don't know. Well, if you just use the cross-reference, I've got a Dixon Study Bible, so it's a cheat sheet. I think without this specific Bible, I don't know that I would have learned this stuff, because I didn't have the internet. I didn't have a human teaching me. I didn't have book after book after book. All I had was cross-references. Connect the dots. That's all we did. And for a decade, we just played connect the dots. And it finally the dam broke. We're like, oh, this stuff is all saying the same thing. This is talking about the transition from Judaism to Christianity. It was on here. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of that great city. I was saying the holy city. I think that's verse 2. The great city, which is spiritually or metaphorically called Sodom and Egypt. Hard part that we are covering. Easy part that you have to insanely try hard to get wrong. Where our Lord was crucified, Jerusalem, Golgotha, right outside the city limits. You cannot get this part wrong. Many people in this building say this verse is talking about Rome. Super easy. Sodom, everywhere Jerusalem is called Sodom. Not as easy, but that is what we are about to cover. That is why I just went through this stuff. That is why I just went through Malachi. Show you these metaphors, to show you this type, anti-type that the Old Testament keeps doing. And this is not the first time. Isaiah has done it repeatedly. We've had many discussions on just the definition of type and anti-type alone. Almost every single day we've been in this class. This is the book of Malachi.